Most people grow up hearing one simple financial rule: debt is bad. Avoid it. Pay it off as quickly as possible. Stay clear of borrowing if you want to be financially secure. For many households, this advice feels sensible, almost moral. Debt is framed as something dangerous, something that causes stress, keeps people trapped, and prevents progress. Stories of people ruined by loans, credit cards, and repayments reinforce this belief, turning debt into something to fear rather than understand. But when you look closely at how wealthy individuals, large companies, and financial institutions actually operate, a different rule emerges. Not all debt is treated the same. In fact, the rule the wealthy follow is far more precise. Unproductive debt is bad. That distinction changes everything. Debt itself is not inherently good or bad. It is not a virtue or a failure. It is a financial tool. And like any tool, its impact depends on how it is used, what it is connected to, and whether it produces more value than it consumes over time. The real difference lies in purpose. Most people use debt to consume. Wealthy primarily use debt to acquire assets. Consumption debt is used to buy things that decline in value or generate no income. Electronics, furniture, lifestyle upgrades, holidays, and everyday spending. Once the purchase is made, the item begins losing value immediately, yet the repayment obligation remains fixed. Interest compounds against the borrower. Cash flows outward every month, reducing flexibility and increasing financial pressure. Asset-based debt works differently. It is used to acquire things that either produce income, appreciate over time, or ideally do both businesses: rental property, productive land, or scalable investments. When debt is tied to an asset that generates cash flow, the debt begins to support itself. The borrower is no longer servicing the loan purely from wages. The asset contributes to repayment. This distinction is subtle but profound. When debt funds consumption, it creates dependency. When debt funds production, it creates leverage. This is why wealthy individuals borrow to buy businesses, property, or income-producing assets even when they technically have the cash available. They are not borrowing because they lack money. They are borrowing because debt, when structured correctly, can be cheaper than using their own capital and can significantly amplify returns. Inflation plays a crucial role in this equation. Inflation reduces the real value of debt over time. A loan taken today is repaid in future currency that is worth less in purchasing power. Meanwhile, well-chosen assets, particularly real assets like property or businesses with pricing power, often rise in value alongside inflation. Rents increase. Revenues adjust. Placement costs climb.
Nice.
This creates a quiet advantage for asset-backed borrowers. The debt remains fixed, while the income and asset value grow. Over long periods, inflation works for the borrower instead of against them. But this advantage is invisible to most people because it requires patience, education, and system-level thinking. It does not show results overnight. It compounds slowly, often unnoticed, until the gap becomes significant. The difference between those who struggle with debt and those who use it strategically is rarely access. Banks lend aggressively to consumers. Credit is widely available. What differs is financial literacy and intent. Debt amplifies behavior. In the wrong hands, it magnifies poor decisions. In the right system, it accelerates disciplined ones. Someone without financial structure often uses debt emotionally to relieve discomfort, reward effort, maintain appearances, or feel momentary relief. Someone who understands leverage uses debt deliberately only after modeling cash flow, downside risk, interest exposure, and time horizons. This is why telling everyone debt is bad oversimplifies the problem. For someone without stable income, emergency reserves, or risk management, debt is dangerous. It introduces fragility. But for someone with predictable cash flow, buffers, and long-term planning, debt becomes a calculated instrument rather than a threat. Wealthy individuals do not treat debt as a lifestyle enhancer. They treat it as a balance sheet tool. They ask different questions before borrowing. Will this asset generate income immediately or over time? Will the cash flow comfortably cover repayments with margin? What happens if income drops temporarily? Hey, how liquid is this asset if I need to exit? How does inflation affect this position over 10 or 20 years? These questions are almost never asked in consumer borrowing. A car loan is approved based on income, not return. A credit card is marketed as convenience, not cost. The decision is emotional, not analytical. This difference compounds over decades. A household that uses debt to consume starts each year with obligations that reduce future options. Their income is pre-committed. Their flexibility shrinks. A household that uses debt to acquire productive assets increases optionality over time. Cash flow grows, equity accumulates. Risk becomes manageable rather than overwhelming. It's important to understand that wealthy individuals are not reckless with debt. In fact, they are often more conservative than average borrowers. They structure loans carefully. They fix interest rates when appropriate. They maintain cash buffers, expect volatility, and plan for it rather than assuming best-case outcomes. The goal is not to avoid debt, is to control it. Another overlooked factor is taxation. In many systems, interest on debt used for investment or business purposes is tax-deductible, while interest on consumer debt is not. This further tilts the equation in favor of productive borrowing. Income-producing assets can reduce taxable income while simultaneously building equity. This does not make debt risk-free, it makes it strategic. Debt only works when it is part of a system. Without cash flow management, reserves, discipline, and patience, leverage collapses. This is why copying surface-level behavior, the rich borrow without understanding structure, leads to failure. The wealthy do not gamble with debt. They calculate. They also separate identity from consumption. Lifestyle inflation is not funded through borrowing. Status is not financed. Image is not leveraged. Debt is reserved for assets that move the balance sheet forward, not for appearances. This is why many high-income individuals remain financially fragile. They earn well, but they borrow like consumers. Income alone does not create wealth. Structure does. Understanding how the rich use debt is not about encouraging borrowing. It is about understanding why blanket rules fail. Debt is bad is easy to remember but incomplete. The real rule is more nuanced. Debt that does not increase future earning capacity is a liability in every sense of the word. Debt that increases productive capacity can shorten the path to financial independence, but only when paired with discipline, buffers, and long-term thinking. This is also why education matters more than access. Credit cards, loans, and financing are available everywhere. What's missing is an understanding of cash flow, risk, and time. Without that understanding, debt becomes a trap instead of a tool. Wealth is rarely built through one dramatic move. It is built through repeated, structured decisions that compound quietly. Used correctly, debt accelerates compounding. Used incorrectly, it reverses it. This is why wealthy families focus on teaching financial structure, not just saving. They learn to read balance sheets early. They understand leverage before using it. They distinguish between assets and liabilities long before taking on large obligations. Debt does not create wealth on its own. Assets do. Debt simply amplifies the outcome. In the wrong system, it magnifies loss. In the right system, it magnifies progress. Understanding this distinction changes how you see money, risk, and opportunity. It shifts the question from, should I avoid debt, to what role does debt play in a larger system?
I see. Once you see that difference,
Financial decisions become clearer. Consumption becomes intentional.
I,
Borrowing becomes deliberate.
I,
Money stops being something you react to and becomes something you design around. That shift does not make debt safe. It makes it understandable. And understanding is where real financial power begins.